Girl who died. When I was 12, my parents took the family on a cruise to Mexico. There, I met a girl who changed my life. Sometimes, I wish I never met her. The first night was rough seas as we cruised through a storm, so I stayed close to my family as we got settled. But on the second night, after the waters calmed, I decided to go to the teen group meeting to try to make some friends for the 2 weeks we would be on the boat. After a brief meet and greet, the group headed off to the theater to watch a show together. During the show, I noticed a girl from my group kept staring at me. She had a face that was beautiful in an effortless way. Her cheeks were framed with dirty blonde locks, and she looked rather thin. When I stared back at her, she looked at me with a growing look of confusion of her face. She mouthed something at me, but I shook my head to tell her I didn't understand. Suddenly, she stands and moves swiftly over into the empty seat next to me. She leans in close and whispers a name that I don't recognize in a hushed voice. I stare blankly back at her as she looks back at me questioningly. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "you look exactly like my friend." I chuckle awkwardly and formally introduce myself and admit that I had never met her before. She tells me her name, Hannah, and apologizes again for her strange behavior. But something clicked between the two of us, and before I knew it, awkward apologies turned into easy conversation, and then we were off to explore the ship together. As the days passed, we spent nearly every waking moment together. We woke up early and met at the computer center each morning, where we would race off to seize the day. We would chat over breakfast, chase each other around the ship, sneak into hot tubs, and always grabbed solarium pizza and fries for lunch. Afterwards, we would spend the afternoon showering, doing our hair and makeup and trying on each other's clothes, and flirting with the ship boys before formal dinner where we would depart to join our individual families. After dinner, we would meet on the upper deck where we talked about everything deep and dark and poetic about ourselves, where our friendship truly blossomed. The last night of the cruise, we were on the upper deck alone, lounging in the reclining pool chairs, and dreading the end of our time together. During a lull in our conversation, my mind recalled the first night we met, and I remembered her strange comment. I asked her, "Who is the girl that you mistook me for when you first saw me?" Her eyes widened, and she looked away sharply. "It's a sad story," she said softly. I sat up, surprised by her reaction, and I leaned in closer. "Did you guys have a fight? You aren't friends anymore?" She looked at me for a long time. It felt like time stretched on forever in her silence. I could see a lot of hesitancy on her face, but I held her gaze. "She's dead," she finally whispered. "She killed herself." I felt my blood go cold, if not just for a moment. Eyes wide, I stuttered, "What? What? What happened?" She took a deep breath. She struggled deeply with how she looked. She felt so upset about it that she didn't want to keep living. She overdosed on her mom's pills. We both sat in silence for a long time, but I felt her eyes on me as I looked out into the dark sea. Large waves of emotions washed over me: shock, sadness, uncertainty, and a growing feeling of discomfort within my own skin. That night, the conversation shifted into another subject, followed by another, while the death lingered in my mind. The next day, we disembarked the cruise ship, and I hugged my friend for the last time. I never spoke to or saw her ever again, beyond the pictures I have stowed away in a dusty photo album deep in my closet. That night still lingers in my mind, and I've never been able to shake it. From that night forward, I began to see myself differently. I began to think more harshly about my appearance. I felt ashamed and embarrassed of the face I wear. I started to avoid photos, as all I began to see were the reasons why she would do it. Anytime someone would compliment me, I felt suspicion. Do they mean it? Are they just being polite or trying to make me feel better about what I am? Sometimes I stare into the mirror and find myself in tears, my heart tearing itself into pieces. Am I truly that awful? Do I not deserve to live either? How could I bear this existence if she couldn't? Even now, after all these years, every day I think about the girl who looked like me, and she hated it so much that she killed herself. Every day, all I see is all the imperfections that led her to her death. Every day, I look back into the face of a girl whose name I've long forgotten, a girl that I never met and never will meet. I look into her eyes, and I wish I never knew her.